All right, let's talk about something that's, well, it's a huge deal for everyone involved: the eviction process. It's not as simple as a landlord just saying, get out. It's a whole journey through the legal system with really specific rules you have to follow. So we're going to break down that journey step by step.
So, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll get into the foundation, why this is a court thing to begin with. Then, we'll look at how it all kicks off with the notice. After that, we dive into the courtroom drama itself. Then, the final stages, judgment and the actual lockout. And, to wrap it all up, we'll talk about why lawyers often get involved.
Okay, first things first, and this is probably the most important thing to get right off the bat. An eviction, it's not just a landlord deciding they want you out. It's a full-blown legal process. It has to go through the courts.
And this quote from the California courts, it really says it all. A landlord can't just lock you out, shut off your utilities, or toss your stuff on the curb. That's what's called a self-help eviction, and it is totally illegal. Think of it this way: the landlord can't be the judge, jury, and executioner. The only legal way to do this is to go through the courthouse.
And you know, the legal world loves its jargon. The official term for this kind of lawsuit, at least in places like California, is an unlawful detainer. It sounds kind of intense, right? But all it really means is that it's the specific legal action a landlord files to get the property back when a tenant won't leave after they've been given a proper notice. So, what kicks this whole legal machine into gear? It all starts with one piece of paper. Every single eviction, doesn't matter why, begins with a formal written notice. This isn't just a suggestion, it's an absolute requirement. Now, not all notices are the same. It really depends on why the landlord is starting the process. If it's about unpaid rent, you'll probably get what's called a 3-day notice to pay or quit. Basically, you have 3 days to pay up or get out. If you broke a rule, maybe you got a pet you weren't supposed to, you might get a 3-day notice to cure or quit. That gives you a chance to fix the problem, find a new home for the pet. The deadlines are different everywhere, from a super fast 3 days in California to maybe 7 days for some things in Florida.
And get this, it's not enough to just write the notice. You have to deliver it in a legally approved way. They're super strict about this. Personal service is pretty straightforward. They hand it right to you. Then there's substituted service, where they can give it to another adult at your home, but they also have to mail you a copy. And the last resort is post and mail, taping it to your door and again, mailing a copy. If the landlord messes up this step, it can throw a huge wrench in their case, might even get the whole thing thrown out.
Okay, so let's say the deadline on that notice comes and goes. The rent isn't paid, the problem isn't fixed, and the tenant is still there. What happens now? Well, this is where things really escalate. We're moving from a warning notice to a full-on lawsuit. Right. So, the tenant hasn't left. This is the moment of truth. The landlord's hands are tied, legally speaking. They can't just change the locks. Their only option now is to go to the courthouse and officially file that unlawful detainer lawsuit. Now, once that lawsuit is filed, you have to understand, this process moves at lightning speed. It's not like other court cases. A clock starts ticking and it is loud. In a lot of states, like Florida and California, the tenant only gets 5 business days to file an official answer with the court. 5 days. And if they do, the trial is often scheduled in just a few weeks, sometimes as little as 20 days later. So yeah, forget slow-motion courtroom dramas. This is a sprint. But hold on, the tenant has a chance to fight back. Filing that response isn't just about buying time. There are real legal defenses they can use. They could say, hey, that notice wasn't delivered correctly, or this is just revenge because I called the health inspector. A really big one is called breach of habitability, which is a fancy way of saying the landlord let the place fall apart and it's not safe or livable. They might even find out the apartment itself is an illegal unit, which can stop an eviction in its tracks.
Okay, so let's fast forward. The trial is over, and the judge has ruled for the landlord. But it's not over yet. Now we get to the final act, actually enforcing the judge's decision.
This part is so crucial to understand. The judge bangs the gavel, but they don't show up at your door. Instead, they sign a judgment. That piece of paper goes to the court clerk, who then issues something called a writ of possession. Think of the writ as the golden ticket. It gets handed over to the sheriff's department, and they are the ones who take over. First, they'll post one last notice on the door, and then, if the tenant is still there, the sheriff comes back to physically remove them. I want to repeat that. Only law enforcement can legally lock you out.
And yeah, this whole thing costs money. It's not just paperwork. To make this process feel a little more real, look at this. $90. That's the actual fee a landlord in Orange County, Florida has to pay the sheriff's office just to get them to come out and enforce that writ of possession. It's the literal price of the final step.
So the tenant is out, the locks are changed, story's over, right? Not quite. The landlord's job isn't done. If the tenant leaves stuff behind, clothes, furniture, whatever, the landlord can't just throw it in a dumpster. There are strict rules. They usually have to safely store the property, send a formal notice to the tenant, and give them a chance to come get it, sometimes for a couple of weeks. So, after hearing all that, the tight deadlines, the specific notices, the court filings, you can probably see why trying to handle this alone can be a nightmare. Which, naturally, brings us to our last topic, calling in the lawyers.
And it's interesting because both landlords and tenants get lawyers for pretty much the same reason, just from opposite sides. Landlords hire them to make sure they check every single box perfectly because one tiny mistake could torpedo their entire case. And tenants hire them to find those mistakes and to make sure their rights are protected. In the end, a good lawyer on either side might even help them avoid court altogether by negotiating some kind of deal, which honestly can be the best case scenario for everybody involved.
So when you step back and look at this whole journey, it really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? What is this system really for? Is it designed to protect the landlord's property rights, their right to control who's in their building? Or is it about ensuring housing stability, protecting people from suddenly being left without a home? It's a massive balancing act, and that constant tension between those two ideas is exactly what makes this whole process so incredibly complicated.